Have you ever witnessed a moment where, in a matter of seconds, a person's entire life is wrongly defined by someone else's gaze? One peaceful morning at the Phoenix airport, Dr. Amira Lennox, the youngest female billionaire of color in the aviation industry, just wanted to take the most important flight of her life. Instead, she was pulled out of first class, surrounded by prying eyes and buzzing phones. Just because she doesn't look like the type of person someone thinks deserves to sit there. If it were you, when judged by your appearance, would you choose to silently endure or stand up for the truth? Do you dare to keep calm when the whole world looks at you as if you are the problem? Before I begin this story, a story about adversity, about dignity, and about something called consequences, I want to ask you, what would you do if your peace was taken away by someone else's fear? If you believe in justice, in courage, in truth, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to join me on Dr. Amira Lennox's emotional journey. The cabin lights inside Gate C-17 at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport glowed a calm, late afternoon gold soft, warm, deceptively peaceful. Outside the aircraft windows, the Arizona sun was sinking, coloring the tarmac in long amber streaks that made the metal fuselage shine like a blade. Passengers were still settling into their seats. The overhead bins clicked open and shut. A baby fussed somewhere in the middle rows. A flight attendant greeted each person with the same practiced kindness that only came from years in the sky. And then, without warning, everything changed. It began with a shift in the atmosphere, subtle at first, like the air itself tightened. The engine hum, that gentle white noise every frequent flyer knows by heart, suddenly dropped into silence. The lights flickered. Several passengers glanced up, confused. The flight attendants exchanged looks. One of them lifted a hand to her earpiece, listening to instructions from someone unseen. Then came the captain's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're experiencing a brief delay. Flight crew, stand by." His tone wasn't casual, not irritated, not routine. It carried that clipped, controlled tension pilots use only when something serious is happening. A moment later, the jet bridge, which had already begun to pull away, lurched back toward the aircraft. The metallic groan echoed through the cabin like a warning. Row 3 stopped talking. Row 7 put down their newspapers. Row 1, the first-class cabin, fell into a cold, watchful silence. And then a new sound entered the space. Heavy footsteps. Not airline staff. Not regular police shoes. These were boots. The kind you hear in government training videos. The kind that belong to people who don't smile at airports. 3 figures appeared at the aircraft doorway. 2 wore dark navy jackets with bold yellow letters across the chest. FAA Security Division. The third, a Port Authority officer, stood just behind them, hand resting near but not on his holster. Every head in the cabin turned. And that was when they said her name. Dr. Amira Lennox, the lead agent called, voice steady. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step off the aircraft with us." First class froze. It was as if the air had been vacuumed out of the cabin. One woman gasped softly. Another man set down his glass of sparkling water, eyes widening. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," while a phone discreetly tilted upward to record. And in the very front row, in seat 1A, the woman everyone was staring at lifted her eyes. Dr. Amira Lennox looked calm, almost too calm. She didn't rush, didn't panic, didn't ask why. Her gaze rose slowly, deliberately, as if she had learned long ago that sudden movements only make things worse in moments like this. She was dressed simply, a fitted black turtleneck, charcoal slacks, and small stud earrings. Her hair was pulled back in a soft bun. No makeup except a touch of tinted lip balm. No jewelry except a thin silver bracelet that caught the cabin light. Nothing about her looked dangerous. Nothing about her looked suspicious. Everything about her looked painfully, unmistakably human. But the agent still stepped toward her. "Ma'am," the lead agent repeated, "we need you to come with us." Now, across the aisle, in seat 1C, a well-dressed woman with perfect blonde waves and a pearl necklace pressed a hand to her chest and whispered loudly enough for half the cabin to hear. "I knew it," she murmured. "I told them something was off. I told them." Her name would later be known to everyone. But at this moment, she was simply the woman whose voice dripped with vindication, Eleanor Whitford. Amira said nothing in return. She didn't even look at Eleanor. Instead, she carefully, quietly closed the slim leather folder on her lap, the folder containing the technical documents she had been reviewing. She exhaled a slow breath, one she held for a fraction too long. A breath that carried memory. Childhood memory. The metal taste of fear. The sting of being singled out. The pressure of someone's suspicion pressing down on her like a hand between her shoulder blades. She had felt this before. Many times. Too many times. A part of her, a part she thought she'd outgrown, rose up with an ache she couldn't fully name. It whispered, "Here we go again." Still, she lifted her chin. "Of course," she said softly. "I'll comply." Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened against the armrest for just half a second. She stood, smoothing her clothes with a careful grace. Two passengers instinctively pulled their knees in as she stepped past. Phones followed her movements like spotlights. Someone whispered, "Isn't she that tech girl from Atlanta?" Someone else muttered, "What did she do?" Another said, "They don't call FAA security unless it's serious." Amira didn't respond. She kept her eyes forward. As she stepped into the aisle, the lead agent moved beside her. The Port Authority officer followed behind, forming a narrow corridor of authority around her. Eleanor Whitford leaned slightly toward the aisle, lips curling. "I just want the plane to be safe," she said in a tone plastered with false concern. "You never know with people these days." Amira paused, not long, not dramatically, just enough for her breath to catch. But she still said nothing. Silence can be its own form of dignity. Then, something unexpected happened. A soft hand, wrinkled with age and life, touched her forearm. Mr. Clayton Rhodes, the older gentleman seated behind Eleanor, leaned forward. His voice carried warmth, the kind that dissolves coldness without trying. "Keep your head up, young lady," he said. "You're not alone." Amira swallowed. Her eyes softened in gratitude. She gave him a gentle nod before continuing down the aisle. The cameras captured every step. Outside the plane, the jet bridge was filled with uniformed personnel. Passengers seated near the windows watched as she was escorted away, her silhouette framed by harsh fluorescent lighting. The metal walls of the jet bridge amplified the echo of each footstep, turning the moment into something heavier than it should have been. Inside, the murmurs grew louder. "That's insane. What on earth happened?" She looked harmless. "But why the FAA? Is she dangerous? What did she do?" But one sentence rose above all the others. It came from a middle-aged man several rows back, voice firm and incredulous. "That's Dr. Amira Lennox. She's one of the leading experts in aviation security. Why would they detain her?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, because none of the passengers knew. Not yet. But someone on that plane did. Someone who had watched Amira in the first-class lounge. Someone who had made a phone call. Someone who had whispered words that had now become a federal emergency. Eleanor Whitford sat back in her seat, crossing her legs with the delicate satisfaction of a person who believed the world still worked according to her rules. She didn't look concerned. She didn't look confused. She looked triumphant. As the agents disappeared with Amira into the terminal, Eleanor whispered under her breath, just loud enough for Harper, her daughter, to hear. "I told them she was a threat, and they listened." Harper, who had been recording nearly everything since boarding, slowly lowered her phone. For a moment her expression flickered, not certainty, not pride, but something closer to doubt. Something small. Something human. But Eleanor didn't see it. Because Eleanor's eyes were fixed only on the jet bridge where Dr. Amira Lennox had just vanished. And she had no idea at all that the world she had always controlled with whispers and glances, with assumptions and entitlement, was about to slip from her hands. She had picked a target she thought she understood. She had picked the wrong woman. And the FAA arriving before the plane even took off was only the beginning. Long before the agents called her name in first class. Long before any stranger whispered suspicions or raised a phone to record her. Dr. Amira Lennox learned what it meant to survive moments like this with her dignity intact. Not with loud protests. Not with tears or apologies. But with the steady, deliberate calm of someone who had trained themselves to breathe through storms. That calm did not come from privilege. It came from history. And that history began far from the polished floors of Phoenix Sky Harbor, in a little brick house on the south side of Atlanta, Georgia. Amira grew up in a neighborhood where people worked hard without expecting applause for it. The kind of place where kids rode secondhand bikes, where porch lights doubled as community beacons, and where her mother's voice rang through the open windows every evening. "Dinner's ready. Wash your hands." Her parents, Michael and Renee Lennox, were not wealthy. They didn't have influence, but what they lacked in resources, they made up for in a fierce kind of love, one that insisted their daughter belonged anywhere her mind could take her. Her father, Michael, was the first to notice the way Amira's eyes sparkled at anything mechanical. He worked long hours as an airport baggage handler, lifting suitcase after suitcase with quiet pride. Some nights, he returned home with aching shoulders but a soft smile and a treasure in his hands. A broken flashlight, a discarded calculator, an old toy airplane missing a wing. "Think you can fix it, Mimi?" he'd ask, calling her by the nickname he'd given her when she was 3. Little Amira would grin, slide onto the living room rug, and begin unscrewing every piece. She didn't always fix things, but she always tried, and her father always watched her with the same gentle certainty. "One day, people will look at you and see brilliance," he'd say. "But until then, you've got to see it in yourself." Those words mattered. They mattered years later, when 9-year-old Amira was stopped by a store's security guard who thought her pockets were too full. She'd only been carrying scrunchies and a folded math worksheet. She remembered the guard's hand on her shoulder, the way shoppers stared, the heat rising in her face not from guilt but from shame. She also remembered her mother arriving, eyes sharp with anger yet soft with comfort. Renee knelt in front of her daughter, brushing a thumb across Amira's cheek. "You are not the problem," her mother whispered. "Other people's fear is." Amira carried that moment with her like a second heartbeat. Years later, she would carry another. The day her father died, Michael Lennox never saw his daughter become Dr. Lennox. He never stood in the audience when she defended her MIT dissertation or launched her company, Lennox Aerial Systems, with nothing but borrowed office space and stubborn hope. He never saw the world finally recognize the brilliance he had always seen. But every time Amira touched a piece of machinery, every time she worked on an algorithm or tightened a bolt inside a prototype, the memory of her father's work-rough hands steadied her. And it steadied her now. The day before the flight in Phoenix, Amira woke early, just after sunrise. She made herself coffee black, the way her father liked it, and sat at her small kitchen table in Atlanta, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. She scrolled through the slides for her Washington, D.C. meeting with the Department of Transportation. It was the biggest deal of her company's life, a $2.5 billion multi-year security contract. Her system, Sky Shield, had the potential to change aviation forever. It analyzed behavioral patterns, scanning thousands of data points within seconds, identifying risks without relying on racial profiling or bias. It saw patterns, not skin color, intent, not assumptions. Its mission aligned with everything she believed in. But success, she knew, came with pressure, heavy pressure. She felt that pressure again the next morning at the airport. She'd arrived early at PHX, carrying nothing but a leather backpack and her laptop. Her flight was scheduled for 5:42 p.m. She moved through security quickly. Pre-check made that easy, but she still felt a familiar tightness in her chest when the scanner beeped and an agent waved her aside for a random check. Random. Always random. Amira gave the agent a small, polite smile as he wiped her palms with a swab. "Just standard procedure," he said. "I know," she replied softly. And she did. Too well. She passed the inspection and walked toward the first-class lounge, reminding herself of her father's words, "See the brilliance in yourself first." Inside the lounge, she tried to relax. She chose a corner seat, away from the crowd, set down her drink, and pulled out her printed technical brief. The room smelled faintly of citrus and old leather. Ice clinked in glasses. A business traveler near her talked too loudly on the phone. A couple in matching sweaters argued about seat assignments. It was life. Normal, messy, imperfect life. For a while, she forgot the weight of the meeting, forgot the ghosts of past humiliations. She even smiled when a little girl passed by, staring curiously at her equations. But the peace didn't last. Not when she felt that stare. A sharp, lingering stare. From across the lounge, a blonde woman in an expensive cream blazer, Eleanor Whitford, watched her the way some people stare at storm clouds. With suspicion, with certainty, with silent judgment. Beside her sat Harper Whitford, tapping rapidly on her phone, recording little snippets of the lounge for her social feed. Amira tried to ignore them. She adjusted her posture, tucked a stray hair behind her ear, and refocused on her work. She reminded herself that she didn't need to shrink to make others comfortable. But she still felt Eleanor's eyes. Not curious, not confused, but assessing. And when a flash of Harper's camera caught her peripheral vision, Amira's stomach twisted. Not fear, frustration. The old kind, the deep kind, the kind that whispered, "No matter how far you go, someone will still think you don't belong." Amira let out a slow breath and lowered her gaze to the document in her hands. Sky Shield Algorithm Revision 3.1. Behavioral Pattern Recognition in High Traffic Zones. She traced a line under a formula, letting the structure calm her. Numbers made sense. People, not always. Still, she refused to leave. Leaving meant surrender. Surrender meant repeating the mistakes of the past. So, she stayed. She chose her place and held it. Just as her father taught her. When her flight was called for boarding, Amira packed her folder neatly into her backpack and headed to the gate. Her steps were measured, confident, almost serene. She had no idea Eleanor had already made a phone call. No idea that Eleanor had fed a story into the Federal Threat Hotline. No idea that FAA agents were already mobilizing based on that call. If she had known, she might have prepared herself. She might have braced her heart, tightened her defenses. She might have remembered to expect the worst even when she hoped for the best. But she boarded like any other passenger. She found her seat one, placed her bag overhead, and sat down with a soft sigh. A sigh filled with hope, with pride for how far she had come, with the simple desire to get to D.C., deliver her presentation, and honor her father's memory. She took out her folder again. She read the cover. Lennox Aerial Systems, Sky Shield Security Suite, Policy Briefing for DOT. She traced her fingers along her company's logo and whispered, barely audible, "Almost there, Dad." Then she looked out the window at the tarmac glowing beneath the setting sun. For one quiet moment, she felt safe. She felt seen. She felt deserving. Moments like that don't last long in stories like these. Because only 2 minutes later, everything unraveled. Only 2 minutes later, Eleanor demanded she be removed. Only 2 minutes later, the engine hum died. Only 2 minutes later, FAA boots hit the jet bridge. And in that moment, all the childhood memories, all the quiet pains, all the lessons forged from past humiliations, pressed against Amira's ribs at once. But she did what she had always done. She breathed. She steadied herself. She held her calm like a shield. The storm was coming, but she would not bend. Not this time. Not anymore. Long before her voice rose in first class, long before she pointed her manicured finger at Amira Lennox and demanded an entire plane take action, Eleanor Whitford had lived her life, believing the world was built for her. Comfort. And in many ways, it had been. Born into old New England money, educated at private academies with manicured lawns and stone fountains, Eleanor grew up in homes where the carpets were imported, where summer meant European coastlines, and where public was a word used only for libraries she never visited. Her world was tidy, curated, predictable. A place where certain people were expected in certain places and others were not. Her father used to say, as he folded the Wall Street Journal, "There is an order to things, Ellie. Remember that." She did remember. She remembered it so deeply that it became the lens through which she viewed everything and everyone. And she protected that order fiercely, even long after the world moved on. Eleanor married Thomas Whitford when she was 28. Thomas was everything her father approved of: wealthy, educated, poised, a man with a powerful jawline, a navy blue wardrobe, and a career with the Federal Aviation Administration that promised stability. After climbing the ladder for decades, Thomas eventually became a regional deputy director overseeing safety protocols in the Western region. For Eleanor, it wasn't his intelligence that impressed her. It was the authority, the title, the influence. She liked being Mrs. Whitford. She liked the doors that opened with that name. But titles don't last forever. When Thomas was forced into early retirement 2 years before the events on Flight 227, Eleanor blamed only one person. Not herself. Not Thomas. Not the changing world. But Dr. Amira Lennox. The brilliant young black engineer who created SkyShield AI. The system that replaced dozens of legacy roles, including Thomas's. The system that outperformed human judgment so well the FAA had no choice but to use it. The Whitfords had never met Amira in person, but Eleanor had heard of her. She had seen her on television, seen her on the covers of industry magazines, seen her smile, confident, grounded, unbothered, and every time she saw Amira's face, something inside her burned. Not jealousy of Amira's wealth, not jealousy of her intelligence, but jealousy of her freedom. Freedom to belong anywhere. Freedom to rise without permission. Freedom without lineage or legacy. So when Eleanor saw that same young woman sitting alone in the first-class lounge chair in a simple bun, wearing a black turtleneck, writing equations in a spiral notebook, the old resentment stirred like a storm reawakening. And it didn't go unnoticed. Her daughter, Harper Whitford, had been live-streaming snippets of their trip for her followers. 24 years old. Always perfectly styled, Harper lived for attention. But beneath the layers of brand deals and bright filters, she struggled with something deeper, a constant need to please her mother. Harper had grown up under the shadow of Eleanor's expectations. Every mistake was magnified. Every failure was a disappointment. So, when Harper saw her mother stiffen at the sight of Amira, she asked the question gently, "Mom, are you okay?" Eleanor didn't answer at first. She just stared, observed, measured. Her eyes moved from Amira's notebook to her quiet concentration to her simple clothes. Clothes Eleanor believed no one respectable would wear in a first-class lounge. Finally, Eleanor spoke, voice low but etched with disdain. "She's watching the tarmac." Harper blinked. "Mom? She looks like she's just working." "No," Eleanor whispered. "People who belong in places like this don't sit like that. They don't hide in corners and scribble notes. Something is off. I can feel it." Harper followed the line of her mother's gaze, squinting slightly. "She's writing formulas," Harper said. I don't think that's suspicious." But Eleanor was already somewhere else, lost inside her own logic, inside her own history, inside the rigid structure her father taught her long ago. "People like her don't usually fly this route," Eleanor muttered. Harper looked around the lounge. "Mom, lots of people fly this route." Eleanor ignored the comment. She leaned forward, lowering her voice as if discussing national secrets. "She's looking at the refueling trucks. And she's been watching the maintenance crew, Mom. And her notes." Eleanor pressed on. "They're technical. Maybe chemical. Maybe worse." "Mom," Harper said again, softer this time, "you're assuming things." Eleanor straightened her blazer. "It's not an assumption if my instincts are right. For most people, an uncomfortable feeling might have ended there. They would have gone back to their book, their drink, their conversation. But Eleanor didn't believe in letting discomfort go. She believed in acting on it, correcting it, eliminating it, and she believed for the first time in years that she could still exert control over the world. So, she asked Harper for her phone. "Why?" "Because I'm making a call." "To who?" Eleanor didn't answer. She dialed. The ringtone was crisp, cold, and frighteningly familiar to her. The aviation threat hotline. The line picked up quickly. "Federal Aviation Safety Tip Line. What are you reporting?" Eleanor lowered her voice, letting just enough fear slip into it to sound convincing. "Yes, hello. I'm in the first-class lounge at Phoenix Sky Harbor. There's a passenger acting strangely." She glanced directly at Amira. "Very strangely." The agent asked questions. Eleanor answered them with alarming confidence. "Yes, she's observing the tarmac. Yes, she's writing things down, technical things. No, I don't feel safe." Her tone grew more dramatic with each sentence. "I fly this route all the time. I've never seen anything like this. Please take this seriously. I have a really bad feeling." By the time the call ended, a false narrative had taken shape so vivid, so detailed, so carefully embellished that the FAA had no choice but to escalate. Harper sat frozen beside her. "Mom, what did you just do?" Eleanor smoothed her hair. "I did my duty." Harper swallowed. "But what if you're wrong?" Eleanor didn't hesitate. "I'm never wrong about people." Harper's eyes drifted to Amira, quiet, focused, unaware of the storm now forming around her. For the first time, Harper felt something foreign toward her mother. Not admiration, not fear, not resentment, but doubt, real doubt. She forced herself to look away. When boarding time arrived and passengers began lining up at the gate, Eleanor felt a strange thrill, a certainty, a vindicated twitch beneath her ribs. She walked onto the plane with Harper behind her, purse slung confidently over her shoulder. It wasn't until she saw Amira again, already seated in 1A, already settled, already belonging, that something inside her snapped. Her voice cut through the cabin like a blade. "I will not sit across from her." Passengers stared. The flight attendant blinked in confusion. Harper covered her face, wishing she were invisible. "Mom, stop," Harper hissed. Eleanor ignored her. "She followed us. She has been acting erratically. I told the people in the lounge. I told them everything. How did she even get on this plane?" Her voice rose higher, sharper. "What if she has something dangerous? What if she's planning something? I want her moved, or I want to be moved." Amira looked up, startled but composed. "I don't know you," she said softly. "Please lower your voice." But Eleanor's voice only grew louder. "She's threatening me now." "No, ma'am," the flight attendant said. "She isn't." "You weren't there," Eleanor snapped. "You didn't see her behavior." "Mom," Harper whispered again, voice cracking. "You're overreacting." Eleanor's face reddened with outrage. "I am protecting this cabin, and if you won't do anything—" The captain's voice interrupted from the cockpit. "Flight attendants, stand by. We're holding for a potential security issue." Eleanor's lips curved into a slow, self-satisfied smile. Finally, the world was listening. Finally, order was being restored. She couldn't realize that the order she believed in was about to collapse beneath her feet. She didn't realize she had poked a sleeping giant. She didn't realize she had chosen the wrong target. But she would. Soon. Very soon. First class on Flight 227 was designed to be a sanctuary: soft lighting, wide seats, and a quiet meant to separate its passengers from the noise of the world. But that afternoon, as passengers finished stowing their bags and settling in, a tension moved through the cabin like a chill that no one could quite explain. Most passengers didn't know yet that something had been set in motion back in the lounge. But Amira Lennox felt it. Not consciously, not logically, more like a familiar tap on the back of her mind, the same sensation she'd felt during every moment in her life when someone watched her, not out of curiosity, but out of judgment. Still, she focused on breathing. She slid her backpack beneath the seat in front of her and pulled out the printed brief she planned to review during takeoff. She had always found comfort in routine, starting a flight with a few minutes of reading, letting the vibrations of the engine calm her. Flights reminded her of her father. He would have loved to see her traveling like this. A flight attendant passed by, a tall man with a gentle smile, and paused. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Lennox," he said warmly, as if he already knew her. "Can I get you anything before we push back?" Amira smiled back, grateful. "Just water, thank you. You've got it." He moved on, and Amira felt a small sense of grounding. There was kindness here, humanity here. She clung to it. But across the aisle in 1C, Eleanor Whitford was not feeling grounded. She was wound tight, like a violin string pulled to the edge of snapping. Her daughter, Harper, sat beside her in 1D, scrolling half-heartedly through her phone, but her hand trembled slightly, betraying her nerves. "Mom," Harper whispered, "please let it go. We're already on the plane. She hasn't done anything." Eleanor didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on Amira, studying her posture, her gestures, even the way she held her water cup. Every action fed the story Eleanor had already written in her mind. A dangerous woman, a suspicious woman, a woman out of place. When people believe they're right, facts don't matter. Only the story they tell themselves does. The flight attendants continued their preparations. The cabin door closed with a solid thud. The final passengers settled. The captain announced that they would be pushing back shortly. And that was when Eleanor spoke again. Only this time, she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm not comfortable," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through the calm. "I want to be moved." The flight attendant from earlier, his name tag read J. Morales, turned toward her with practiced patience. "I'm sorry, ma'am. All first-class seats are full. Is there something wrong with your seat?" "It's not the seat," Eleanor said, jabbing her chin toward Amira. "It's her." She was acting strange in the lounge. She was writing things down, watching the fueling trucks. "I don't feel safe sitting near her." The cabin fell to silence, every eye drawn to the confrontation. Even people who tried not to look, looked. Amira lifted her head just slightly. She didn't move otherwise. She didn't speak, but a tiny pulse beat hard in her throat. Morales drew a slow breath. "Ma'am, I assure you that Dr. Lennox is cleared to fly, and—" "You don't know what she's planning," Eleanor said sharply. "You didn't see what I saw." "Mom," Harper whispered through clenched teeth. "Please stop." "No," Eleanor said, her voice rising. "I won't ignore my instincts. Not with everything happening in the world." She could have anything in that bag. A flash of humiliation warmed Amira's neck. Her bag. Her harmless, everyday bag. Amira forced her breathing to slow. She didn't want to react. She didn't want to give the moment power. But sitting still felt like swallowing gravel. Morales tried again. "Ma'am, we cannot move passengers based on feelings alone." "This isn't a feeling," Eleanor shot back. "This is a safety hazard. I reported her behavior to the authorities. They'll confirm everything." That sentence landed like a crack of thunder. Amira looked up fully now. "You what?" Eleanor smirked, as though expecting applause. "I called the federal hotline. I told them everything. I'm protecting this flight." Harper's hands flew to her face, mortified. "Oh my God, Mom," a man in row 2, middle-aged, in a Navy suit, muttered. "You reported her to the FAA? Over writing notes?" Eleanor didn't even turn. Her attention remained fixed on her target. "I want her removed. Do you hear me? Removed." Morales held up a hand, trying to remain calm. "I'll notify the purser. Please stay seated." "No," Eleanor said, rising halfway out of her seat. "I will not sit here until you take this seriously." The instant she stood, the entire cabin shifted. People tensed, the atmosphere thickened, and the plane stopped moving. The engine that had begun to power up faltered, then went silent. The cabin lights dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again. The PA system crackled to life. "Crew, stand by. Please return to your positions." A moment later, the captain's voice followed, calm, controlled, authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're pausing departure due to a potential security matter." Eleanor sat down slowly, a look of satisfaction settling on her face like powder. Harper closed her eyes. Morales stepped into the forward galley to make a call. His voice was low, tense, urgent. When the purser, Mark Sullivan, arrived moments later, he had the look of a man who'd handled many difficult passengers, but not one quite like this. "Ma'am," Sullivan said, keeping his tone even, "my crew tells me you have a concern with another passenger." "Yes," Eleanor said sharply. "Her. Seat 1A. Mark Sullivan glanced at Amira, a glance filled with recognition and surprise. "Dr. Lennox," he said respectfully. "Are you all right?" Amira nodded, though her chest felt tight. "Yes, but this is a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Eleanor barked. "No. I heard her talking to herself about timers and sequences. I saw her writing things down." Amira blinked, genuinely confused. "I was reviewing security algorithms. That's my job." Eleanor scoffed. "Convenient." Harper whispered, almost inaudible. "Mom, please." But Eleanor wasn't listening. She was too far inside her own story. "Call the captain," Eleanor insisted. "I will not sit next to someone who could endanger this flight." Mark Sullivan exhaled, then spoke gently but firmly. "Mrs. Whitford, you made a report to the FAA. That's being handled, but until they arrive, you must remain seated." The word "arrive" sent a ripple through the cabin. "Arrive? The FAA? Here?" What do you mean arrive? A nervous man in row 3 asked. Sullivan pressed his lips together. It means exactly that, sir. Someone else murmured. They only respond like that for serious threats. Eleanor leaned back, pride blooming on her face like a poisonous flower. Good, she said. I'm glad they took me seriously. But it was Harper's face, pale, shrinking, almost trembling, that held the truth. She wasn't proud. She wasn't convinced. She was scared. Scared of what her mother had unleashed. Scared of what would happen next. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then 3. Then the jet bridge thudded into place. A mechanical groan vibrated through the plane, followed by heavy, unmistakable footsteps. Sullivan straightened his jacket. Harper covered her mouth. Eleanor folded her hands primly, believing salvation had arrived. But Amira closed her eyes for one slow, steadying breath. And when she opened them, she saw something that made her understand, truly understand, that everything was about to change. The FAA agents weren't walking toward Eleanor. They were walking toward her. The moment the FAA agents stepped onto the aircraft, the air inside the first-class cabin changed. Not metaphorically, literally. Even the temperature seemed to drop. Conversations died mid-sentence. Seatbelts clicked quietly as people sat up straighter. Every phone in the cabin lowered, not out of courtesy, but out of instinct. These were not airport police responding to a disruptive passenger. These were federal agents responding to a threat, and the person they were here for was still sitting silently in 1A. Hands folded neatly in her lap. Dr. Amira Lennox didn't look dangerous. She didn't look suspicious. She didn't even look nervous. What she looked like was tired. Tired in a way only people who have been judged their entire lives could understand. Tired in a way that made her spine stay straight, even when her heart clenched tight. Tired in a way that required strength most people never had to develop. But she didn't look away when the agents approached. She lifted her chin slowly, deliberately, and met their eyes. The lead agent, tall with broad shoulders and dark hair cropped short, stopped in the aisle. His voice was level, firm, and distinctly official. Dr. Lennox? I'm Agent Daniel Reeves with the FAA Security Division. This is Agent Sophia Calderon. We're here to speak with you. A murmur rippled through the cabin. People didn't just recognize authority. They felt it. Agent Reeves continued. We need you to step off the aircraft with us. Eleanor Whitford inhaled sharply, as if savoring the moment. I knew it, she whispered loudly. Harper closed her eyes, wishing she could disappear. Amira didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't protest. She didn't ask why because she already knew why. Instead, she said quietly, May I ask, am I being detained? Agent Reeves didn't blink. We need you to come with us. Now. Sophia Calderon stepped in gently, her tone softer. Dr. Lennox, it's best we speak somewhere private. Somewhere private. Meaning somewhere she could be questioned. Meaning somewhere she would be alone. Meaning somewhere she would be treated as a threat. A familiar ache tightened behind Amira's ribs. Not fear. Recognition. Before she could stand, a hand rose from behind her. Mr. Clayton Rhodes, the older gentleman with silver hair and steady eyes, leaned forward. Excuse me, he said. I know this woman, not personally, but professionally. She's Dr. Lennox. She designs aviation safety systems, and she's not a threat to anyone. Agent Reeves didn't look at him. Sir, please remain seated and do not interfere. Clayton's jaw tightened. I won't remain silent while you drag an innocent woman off a plane. Reeves stepped closer, authority radiating off him like heat. Sir, last warning. Sit back. Amira turned slightly toward Clayton. Her voice, barely above a whisper, held a strength deeper than steel. It's all right, she said. Please, don't make this harder. Clayton met her eyes, sorrow softening his expression. They shouldn't be doing this to you, he said quietly. Amira gave him a small, grateful nod. I know. Then she stood, slow, graceful, controlled, like someone who had prepared her whole life for moments that shouldn't have existed. As she stepped into the aisle, Eleanor leaned toward her, eyes bright with cruel triumph. I just want the plane to be safe, she said sweetly. You understand. Amira looked at her for the first time. Really looked. There was no anger in her eyes. Just disappointment. And something deeper, something like sadness. Not for herself, but for a world where people like Eleanor still existed. Without a word, she turned away. Agent Reeves gestured toward the front. This way, Dr. Lennox. Amira walked forward with deliberate, calm, but she felt every pair of eyes on her. Some filled with concern, some with confusion, some with fear, even though the only dangerous thing in the cabin had been a lie. Phones discreetly lifted. Videos began recording. Hashtags were being born without anyone knowing. The sound of her footsteps on the jet bridge echoed like a slow countdown. When they reached the terminal, the agents led her into a small, windowless room at the end of a restricted hallway. A cold fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The metal table reflected the harsh brightness. The air smelled faintly of industrial cleaner. This was not the kind of place meant for comfort. This was a place meant for confession. Amira sat where they gestured. Her hands rested on the table, fingers interlocked. Her breathing stayed steady, not because she wasn't shaken, but because she refused to let them see her shaken. Agent Reeves stood opposite her, reviewing something on a tablet. Agent Calderon took the seat beside him, her eyes scanning Amira carefully, thoughtfully. A long moment passed before Reeves spoke. Dr. Lennox, we received a detailed threat report that included your description. From whom? Amira asked. Reeves glanced at his screen. A passenger named Eleanor Whitford. Amira closed her eyes briefly, inhaling once. Calderon jumped in gently. We're required to take all such reports seriously. I understand, Amira said softly. So, Reeves continued, we need to ask you several questions regarding your behavior in the lounge. What you were writing, what you were observing, and your intentions for this flight. Amira lifted her gaze. My intentions, she said, were to land in Washington, D.C. for a federal security briefing on aviation safety. Reeves paused. Calderon blinked. What briefing? She asked. Amira reached slowly into her bag, lifting her hands to show she had nothing dangerous, and pulled out her printed Sky Shield briefing packet. She slid it across the table. Reeves picked it up. His eyes moved across the header. Lennox Aerial Systems, Sky Shield Security Suite. Policy Briefing for Department of Transportation. Presented by Dr. Amira Lennox. His jaw tightened. Calderon leaned over to read. Her eyebrows shot up. Oh, she muttered under her breath. Wait. Reeves looked up at Amira with new awareness. You're that Dr. Lennox. The one who created Sky Shield? Calderon added. Amira nodded quietly. Yes. Reeves exhaled, closing the folder. That system flagged over 6,000 potential security vulnerabilities last year, he said, and helped prevent 3 international incidents. Calderon added softly. Amira didn't respond. She didn't need to. Silence filled the room. Reeves rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture of growing discomfort. Calderon shifted forward, her voice gentler now. Dr. Lennox, did you have any interaction with Mrs. Whitford? No, Amira said. I never spoke to her. Did you threaten her in any way? No. And the notes you were writing? Reeves asked. My presentation, Amira said. Behavioral pattern recognition models. Reeves's eyes flicked to the report again, the equations Eleanor had called dangerous scribbles. He let out a slow breath. It was clear now. Everything Eleanor had claimed was wrong. Every assumption she made was baseless. Every fear she felt was a story she invented. A lie. A lie that had become federal truth the moment she said it. Outside the room, the hallway was alive with the distant sound of airport. Chaos, frustrated passengers. Voicemail announcements, rolling luggage. The world kept moving. But inside the room, everything stood still. Finally, Reeves lowered the folder. Dr. Lennox, he said, voice quieter now. I believe there has been a serious misunderstanding. Calderon nodded. We're going to sort this out. Amira didn't smile. She didn't relax. She simply said, thank you. Not because she felt grateful, but because she was too tired to feel anything else. She folded her hands again, settling into the silence that followed. For now, she would wait. For the truth to catch up. For the lies to collapse. For the sky to open again. Because she knew something Eleanor Whitford had never learned. The sky does not belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who rise. The room became impossibly quiet after Agent Reeves acknowledged that something was wrong with the report. It wasn't the kind of silence that comforts or settles. It was the kind that presses against the skin, reminding everyone inside that a mistake had already spiraled too far. Amira sat still, her palms resting together on the cold metal table. She waited not out of patience, but because she had learned a long time ago that defending yourself too quickly only feeds suspicion. Silence can be a shield, even when it hurts to hold it. Agent Sophia Calderon broke the tension first. "Dr. Lennox," she said softly, "I want you to know that we're going to figure this out. And we'll do it properly." Her voice had warmth, but the air remained heavy. Amira nodded once. "I appreciate that." Reeves paced once behind his chair, then leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." He hesitated. "Do you think Mrs. Whitford targeted you intentionally? Not out of fear, but out of something else?" It wasn't the question itself that hurt, it was how familiar it felt. How many times in her life had Amira been asked to explain someone else's prejudice? How many times had she been asked to justify why someone saw her through distorted lenses? But she answered calmly. "I don't know her," Amira said, "and she doesn't know me." But her assumptions felt personal. Calderon watched her carefully. "What do you mean?" Amira didn't want to sound bitter. She didn't want to sound angry. But truth doesn't need to shout to be heavy. In the lounge, Amira said, "She stared at me like I was breaking a rule she believes exists. A rule I apparently violated by simply sitting in the same place as her." Reeves looked away for a moment, jaw grinding slightly. "And in the cabin," Amira continued, "she didn't speak to me like I was a stranger. She spoke to me like I was an inconvenience she needed removed." Calderon's brow tightened. "She spoke about instincts," Amira said quietly. "But sometimes people confuse instinct with prejudice, and prejudice with danger." Reeves let out a long breath through his nose. "We see false reports sometimes, but not like this. Not with this level of detail. Not with the federal hotline." Calderon added gently. "Her report was extremely specific. Too specific for a random misunderstanding." Reeves nodded. "Which means she either misinterpreted what she saw, or she intentionally fabricated it." Amira didn't respond. Reeves looked at her carefully. "You don't strike me as the type who gets flustered easily." Amira gave a small, faint smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. "I've had practice." A knock interrupted them. Sullivan, the purser, stepped into the room cautiously. His face looked different now. The professional mask was gone, replaced by something more human, something close to regret. "Agents," he said quietly, "the situation in the cabin has escalated." Reeves straightened. "How so?" There was a pause. "Passengers are upset," Sullivan said. "A few witnessed the argument in first class. Some are asking why he nodded toward Amira, was removed instead of the person who started it." Calderon whispered, "Good." But Sullivan wasn't finished. "And Mrs. Whitford is becoming more agitated. She's insisting she saved the plane and that you're detaining the wrong person." Reeves muttered under his breath, "Of course she is." "And," Sullivan added with a wince, "her daughter is crying." That hit Amira unexpectedly. Crying? She didn't want anyone to cry because of her. Not even someone attached to the woman who had caused all of this. "Is Harper all right?" Amira asked softly. Sullivan blinked. He wasn't expecting that question. "I think she's overwhelmed," he admitted. Reeves closed the folder on the table. "We'll handle it." He turned back to Amira. "Dr. Lennox, I'm formally concluding this phase of questioning. You are not under suspicion, and you are not detained." A small exhale left her a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thank you," she whispered. But Reeves wasn't finished. "However," he said, "protocol requires us to follow up on all parts of Mrs. Whitford's report. We're going to speak to her next." Amira nodded again, her composure returning piece by piece. "May I wait outside?" she asked. Calderon softened. "Of course. You don't need to stay in this room." Amira stood, smoothing her blouse, and stepped out into the hallway. The fluorescent light felt even harsher now, bouncing off the linoleum floor. She leaned against the wall with crossed arms, eyes closed for a brief moment. The hallway smelled like stale air and industrial detergent, sterile, lonely. She rubbed her thumb over her bracelet, a grounding habit from childhood. She whispered to herself, "Almost there. Almost through it." The door opened again. Calderon stepped out, followed by Reeves. A third person, the airport station manager, joined them, holding a tablet and looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. "They're ready," Reeves said. "Let's go." They walked together toward the first-class gate area. Passengers were everywhere, standing, pacing, complaining. A crowd had gathered near the podium. Phones recorded everything. The hum of public frustration filled the air. But all of that noise faded when Amira saw Harper. The young woman sat alone in a corner seat near the window, arms wrapped around her knees, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked small, fragile, trapped in a storm she didn't start and couldn't stop. For a moment, Harper lifted her head, and her gaze met Amira's. Their eyes locked. Harper's lips parted, as if she wanted to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but the words didn't come. Instead, she swallowed hard, looked down again, and wiped her face. Amira felt something twist in her chest. Sympathy, compassion, pain. Strangely enough, not everyone in the Whitford family was guilty. Some were simply caught in the orbit of someone louder, older, and far more destructive. The agents approached the podium, where Eleanor Whitford stood tall, chin lifted, confidence radiating off her like perfume. The moment she saw Reeves, she plastered on a polite smile. "Ah, finally," she said. "I hope you've come to confirm everything I reported." Reeves didn't smile back. "Mrs. Whitford," he said with unmistakable firmness, "we need to speak with you. Now." Eleanor blinked. "Of course. I'll be happy to help the investigation." Calderon stepped up beside him. "Ma'am, this will take place in a secured room." "A secured? For me?" Eleanor laughed. A laugh with no humor. "Yes," Calderon said plainly. The passengers around them sensed the shift. Phones lifted again. A few whispers shot through the crowd. Harper's head jerked up, eyes wide. "Mom?" But Eleanor scoffed, brushing imaginary dust off her sleeve. "Well, I suppose the government must treat any threat seriously. Even the person who reported it." Reeves leaned in, voice low and cold. "Mrs. Whitford, this is not about the person you reported." Eleanor's expression cracked. A tiny fracture, barely visible. "What? What do you mean?" Calderon took a slow step forward. "It's about the false allegations you made." Silence fell, not just from Eleanor, from everyone. Eleanor's face paled. I don't understand. I was trying to protect the plane. I was doing the right thing." Reeves didn't soften. "Ma'am, you made a detailed, inaccurate, and misleading federal report. That is a violation of aviation security protocols and federal law." A stunned breath left Harper's lungs. Eleanor's lips trembled. "No, no, this is backwards." She pointed at Amira. She was the one acting suspicious. She was writing things. Amira stepped forward, calm and controlled. "I was preparing for a federal briefing," she said quietly. "That's all." Eleanor shook her head violently. "You're lying." Reeves cut her off. "Mrs. Whitford, you need to come with us." Harper stood now, shaking. "Mom, please don't make it worse." For the first time, Eleanor looked scared. Truly scared. Are you arresting me?" she whispered. Calderon didn't blink. "That depends on what you say next." Eleanor Whitford froze in place, every muscle in her face tightening, as if someone had reached inside her mind and pulled the world out from under her feet. The confidence she carried like armor, shiny, rigid, impenetrable, cracked in an instant. And once a crack begins, it rarely stops where it starts. What are you saying?" Eleanor whispered. Agent Reeves didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mrs. Whitford," he said, "your report contains several claims that are inconsistent with security footage, witness statements, and the behavior observed by airport staff." Eleanor blinked rapidly, her breath hitching. "That's impossible. I saw what I saw." Calderon stepped forward, her voice steady but stern. "Ma'am, you described Dr. Lennox as muttering about avionics, taking notes about refueling, observing the tarmac like she was planning an interference with the aircraft. Yes, Eleanor insisted. Exactly. Except, Calderon said, none of that happened. The crowd around them held their collective breath. Passengers leaned closer, phones tilted upward. Even the humming AC vents seemed to pause. She was writing, Eleanor snapped. Reeves replied. She was reviewing briefing notes related to a federal presentation on aviation cybersecurity. Your accusation was not just incorrect, it was reckless. Eleanor's face flushed. So she's some kind of expert? Before the agents could speak, Amira stepped forward on her own. I didn't want to announce my title in the lounge, she said softly. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I shouldn't need a title to justify my existence in a public space. Every head turned toward her. Amira continued. Not in an airport lounge, not in a first-class cabin, not anywhere. Eleanor's lips trembled, but she scoffed. This is absurd. This is political correctness gone wild. I was trying to protect the plane, protect everyone. Harper's voice cut in unexpectedly small, shaky. Mom, please stop. Eleanor turned sharply. Harper, don't you dare. No, Harper said louder, wiping her tears with her sleeve. You need to listen. You need to really listen. I saw what you did. You followed her with your eyes the entire time. You were upset the moment she walked into the lounge. Eleanor stared at her daughter as though she had spoken in another language. I was concerned, Eleanor insisted. No, Harper whispered. You were judging her. Reeves cleared his throat, reopening the official conversation. Mrs. Whitford, he said, we've reviewed your call to the federal hotline and the report you gave the crew. Both contain specific, actionable claims that were untrue. We are obligated to address that under federal security protocol. Eleanor's voice turned shrill. So, I'm the criminal now? I'm the villain for trying to keep people safe? Calderon didn't flinch. No. You're being questioned because your actions triggered federal consequences. And your statements resulted in the wrongful removal of a passenger, Reeves added. Eleanor stepped back, bumping against the edge of the podium. This is insane. You're twisting everything. You're all protecting her because... She stopped. Everyone knew exactly what word she almost said. Silence rolled through the gate area like a wave. Harper closed her eyes, mortified. Amira swallowed, steadying herself. She knew that silence. She had lived inside it more than once. That moment when the truth someone tries to hide claws its way to the surface. Reeves' jaw tightened. Mrs. Whitford, please come with us now. But Eleanor wasn't ready to surrender her world. She smoothed her hair, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward with a fragile facsimile of confidence. I am not going anywhere until I speak to someone in charge, she declared. Someone with actual authority. Someone who understands that when a well-traveled woman reports a threat, it should be taken seriously. Calderon raised an eyebrow. That's exactly what we're doing. No, Eleanor snapped. Not this. Not treating me like I'm the issue. Reeves exchanged a look with Calderon, one part frustration, one part exhaustion. Then, he said the words that finally made the world shift for everyone watching. Mrs. Whitford, this is your issue. For a moment, Eleanor looked almost childlike small, bewildered, betrayed by a world she believed revolved around her. I don't understand, she whispered. Amira felt something in her chest twist again. An uncomfortable mix of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of inevitability. There's a point in every confrontation where a person has to face themselves. Eleanor had reached hers. Not gracefully, not quietly, but undeniably. Reeves gestured to two uniformed Port Authority officers, waiting nearby. Ma'am, we're escorting you to a private room for questioning. You may come voluntarily or... Wait. Harper rushed forward, grabbing her mother's arm. Mom, please just go with them. Don't make this harder. But Eleanor shook her off. No, you don't understand. They're accusing me of lying. They think I... She looked at Amira then, really looked past the assumptions, past the twisted story she built to justify her discomfort. And for the first time, something like recognition flickered across her face. Not understanding, not remorse, but awareness. You're not supposed to be in first class. Eleanor said quietly, her voice thin and breaking. Not shouted, not hissed, just spoken. The most honest sentence she'd said all day. The crowd gasped. Harper covered her face with both hands. Reeves closed his eyes for the briefest moment. Amira felt heat rise up her throat, but she willed her breathing to stay steady. This moment wasn't victory. It wasn't validation. It was simply sad. Calderon stepped closer, her voice ice-cold. Mrs. Whitford, that statement alone is enough to demonstrate motive. Eleanor's knees weakened visibly. Motive? She whispered. Yes, Reeves said, for filing a false federal report. Harper sobbed into her palms. Mom, what did you do? Eleanor looked around helplessly, as if the walls and windows of the airport would rise up and defend her, as if the crowd would affirm her worldview, as if her privilege would serve as a parachute one more time. But there was only silence, and the truth she could no longer outrun. When the officers stepped forward, Eleanor's voice cracked completely. I don't deserve this. Reeves' reply held no malice, only fact. Dr. Lennox didn't deserve what happened to her either. Eleanor's breath shuddered. Her last defense failed. And the moment she stopped resisting, the spell broke. The officers gently placed their hands near her elbows, not grabbing, but guiding. Please come with us, one said quietly. Eleanor finally moved. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile floor, each step echoing the collapse of the world she had built on unchallenged assumptions. Harper reached toward her, wanting to say something, but unable to form words. Amira instinctively stepped back, giving the family space as they passed. The officers led Eleanor down the hallway, her posture no longer rigid, her chin no longer lifted. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like someone who had never been held accountable before and now suddenly was. A very human tragedy. The room they moved Eleanor into was the same one where Amira had been questioned earlier, small, windowless, and washed in fluorescent light that revealed every flaw and every tremble. It wasn't meant to intimidate. It simply did. Some rooms carry a gravity you can't argue with. Harper followed the group only halfway before stopping in the hallway, unsure if she was allowed inside. Agent Calderon gave her a gentle shake of the head. You can wait here, she said softly. Harper nodded, hugging herself, her mascara streaks drying like faint bruises under her eyes. Amira stood farther down the hall, not wanting to crowd the girl, but watching her with quiet concern. Harper looked up suddenly, eyes shining with fear and confusion. Is she? Harper swallowed hard. Is she going to be arrested? Amira didn't answer right away. She chose her words with the same care she used for designing aircraft systems, precise, honest, never rushed. That depends on the truth, she said finally. Harper's lips trembled. But she's my mom. Amira nodded gently. I know. There was a long pause, full of unspoken things. Guilt, regret, shame. The heavy kind you inherit even when you didn't earn it. Then, Harper whispered, I'm sorry. Amira blinked. For what? Harper hesitated, then pointed vaguely toward the world outside. For everything. For what she did. For not stopping her. For not saying something sooner. Her voice cracked. I knew she was wrong. I knew she was angry. But I didn't think she'd go this far. Amira stepped closer, not too close, just enough for Harper not to feel alone. You're not responsible for her choices, Amira said quietly. And you did speak up. That matters. Harper wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. It didn't change anything. It will, Amira said, a soft steadiness in her tone. Sometimes the things we say don't change the moment, but they change people. Harper looked away, but her shoulders relaxed just a little. Inside the room, raised voices began to seep through the door. Eleanor's. And she was unraveling. Eleanor's voice rose sharply. You're twisting my words. This is a misunderstanding. I was simply being cautious. Reeves replied, firm and unyielding, Mrs. Whitford. This is not caution. This is fabrication. I did what any responsible citizen would do, Eleanor insisted. She was acting strangely. Ma'am, Reeves said, there is no evidence, none, that Dr. Lennox behaved suspiciously. You don't understand, Eleanor cried. I felt something was wrong. Calderon spoke with calm precision. Your feelings do not justify false statements on a federal hotline. There was a pause, a tense one. Then, Eleanor said the words that sealed her fate. I just didn't think someone like her belonged there. The room fell painfully still. On the other side of the door, Amira closed her eyes not in defeat, but in recognition. These were words she'd heard before. In classrooms, in boardrooms, in spaces where she was expected to prove herself 10 times over just to be seen as equal. Reeves' voice dropped. Mrs. Whitford, the honesty is noted, but it confirms motive. There was a sharp sound, Eleanor's breath catching, as if she'd been hit. I didn't mean. Yes, Reeves said softly. You did. A few minutes later, the door opened. Calderon stepped out first, her expression unreadable but serious. Reeves followed, carrying a file and a small recorder. They didn't say a word at first. Harper jumped to her feet. What's happening? Is she okay? Reeves answered steadily. She will be processed according to protocol. The word processed made Harper's knees wobble. Please, Harper whispered. Please don't take her away like she's a criminal. Calderon softened her voice. We're still evaluating the charges, but lies that activate federal aviation response are serious. You know that. Harper buried her face in her hands again. Reeves looked toward Amira. Dr. Lennox, he began, thank you for your cooperation. We'll be issuing you a formal statement confirming the findings. You will not be prevented from travel. Amira nodded, though the relief was quiet, muted. Will the flight continue? She asked. Reeves shook his head. No. The aircraft will remain grounded until we've completed all security sweeps. It may be several hours. Amira exhaled. I figured. However, Calderon added, arrangements are being made for you. Amira frowned. Arrangements? Before she could ask further, the station manager hurried over, sweating, breathless. Dr. Lennox, he said, Aura Airlines extends its deepest apologies for what occurred. We're arranging immediate private transport for you to Washington, D.C. A charter jet will be ready within the hour. Harper looked up in surprise. Wait, they're giving her a jet? Amar blinked. That isn't necessary. It is, the station manager insisted, voice shaking. We failed you. Amira hesitated. She wasn't used to being offered things she hadn't earned. It felt strange, uncomfortable, almost undeserved despite everything that had happened. But she knew the airline wasn't offering it out of generosity, they were offering it out of liability. Reeves added, your testimony will be required in the formal report, and any support you need from federal channels we can coordinate. Amira nodded slowly. Thank you. Down the hallway, 2 officers guided Eleanor out of the room. Her eyes were red, her expression hollow, her carefully crafted composure gone entirely. She looked like someone who had tripped over her own certainty and fallen into a pit she didn't believe existed. Harper stepped forward instinctively. Mom? Eleanor turned toward her daughter, and something inside her cracked. Her voice came out small, frightened. Harper, tell them I'm not a bad person. Harper's breath shuddered. I can't fix this, she whispered. You have to take responsibility. The officers paused to allow the exchange, but kept a respectful distance. Eleanor's face crumpled. But I didn't mean any harm. I just didn't want. She trailed off because she didn't know how to finish the sentence. Or because she did, but the ending wasn't something she could say aloud. Harper didn't look away this time. You hurt her, she said. Her voice was steady. You hurt everyone. Eleanor's chin trembled. I'm your mother. I know, Harper said softly. And I love you, but what you did was wrong. Amira felt something twist painfully again. A reminder that even when justice is served, it can still break a family in ways no one intended. The officers cleared their throats gently. Ma'am, we need to continue. Eleanor reached out toward Harper, but Harper stepped back not out of rejection, but out of necessity. Eleanor's hand dropped, and she walked away, quietly, slowly, without fight, carried not by force, but by the weight of consequences she never imagined would belong to her. As the hallway slowly emptied, Amira turned to leave. Her body felt heavier than it should have. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a quiet ache in its place. Agent Calderon approached her. Dr. Lennox, she said gently. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Amira smiled faintly. It's not your fault. No, Calderon admitted, but I still wish it hadn't happened. Things like this shouldn't happen. Not anymore. Amira looked down the corridor, where Eleanor had disappeared moments earlier. Things like this always happen, she said softly. But maybe the way they end can change. Calderon studied her with genuine admiration. You're stronger than most people I know. Amira shook her head gently. I'm just tired of surviving what other people imagine. Calderon exhaled. I hope someday you won't have to. So did Amira. More than she could express. The airport terminal finally began to thin out, leaving behind a quieter, more fragile atmosphere like the echo after a storm. The loud conversations, the tension, the sharp edges of public conflict began to fade into scattered murmurs and distant footsteps. People returned to their own concerns. Flights resumed. Gate announcements filled the air again. But for the few who had witnessed everything up close, the world felt different. Amira watched the hallway for a moment longer, as if expecting Eleanor to reappear somehow, to undo the damage, to offer a last-minute apology that would never come. She didn't know why she waited. Maybe habit, maybe hope, maybe the quiet ache of knowing raw justice always carried a price. Harper was still standing there, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her shoulders trembling with every unsteady breath. She looked like she might collapse if someone touched her, so fragile and stretched thin she could barely hold her own weight. Amira approached gently. You should sit, she said. Harper wiped her eyes again. I can't. Not yet. Do you want to talk to someone? Airline staff? A counselor? Harper shook her head. I don't need a stranger. Her voice cracked. I just don't understand how everything went so wrong so fast. Amira didn't rush to answer. She leaned lightly against the wall beside Harper, giving her space while remaining close. Things don't fall apart suddenly, Amira said softly. They break slowly, over years, and one day something small pushes them over the edge. Harper nodded slowly, her gaze distant. She's not a monster, Harper whispered. She's not. It sounded like she was trying to convince herself. I know, Amira replied gently. People who hurt others aren't always monsters. Sometimes, they're just people who never learn to question themselves. Harper closed her eyes. I should have said something sooner. You did say something, Amira reminded her. And you said it when it mattered. Harper breathed shakily. I feel like I just watched my mom unravel in front of everyone. And I couldn't stop it. Amira watched her quietly. You couldn't stop what she already believed, she said. That isn't your burden to carry. Harper looked up at her eyes red, but clearer now. You're too kind, Harper whispered. Even after what she did. How are you not furious? Amira gave a tired smile. Oh, I am, she said softly. But anger isn't always loud. There was a pause. Sometimes, she added, it's just a quiet refusal to break. Harper stared at her for a long moment, then nodded, as if something inside her finally settled. The station manager returned, still flustered and apologetic. Dr. Lennox, ma'am, we've coordinated with your office and federal contacts. Your charter flight will depart from a private terminal. Transportation will be ready shortly. Amira didn't like special treatment. She never had. It always carried the implication that someone was trying to make up for something unforgivable. But she also knew she couldn't miss the briefing in D.C. Thank you, she said. The manager hesitated. If you prefer to speak to the press. No. The word came sharp and immediate. He swallowed. Of course. Amira's eyes softened. Today doesn't need more noise. He nodded, relieved, and hurried away. Agent Calderon approached next, her expression thoughtful, her posture relaxed now that the crisis had shifted into paperwork and consequences. Dr. Lennox, she said, will forward our full report to your office within the next few days. You may be contacted by legal representatives for follow-up. I understand. If you need anything, Calderon added, support, clarification, just reach out. Amira gave her a grateful nod. Thank you, she said, for listening, and for doing this right. Calderon allowed herself a small smile. We try. Reeves joined a moment later. Carrying a folder he seemed reluctant to hand over. This is a preliminary statement confirming you were not at fault, he said. A formal version will come later, but this will help if any media tries to twist the narrative. I appreciate it, Amira replied. Reeves looked at her for a long moment, something like regret flickering behind his professional demeanor. I'm sorry your day looked like this, he said. Amira held his gaze. It's not the first time. Reeves bowed his head slightly. I wish that weren't true. So do I, Amira said. When the agents finally walked away, Amira turned toward Harper again. The girl was staring at the floor, her shoulders slumped in a way that made her look much younger than she was. Harper, Amira said gently, do you have someone who can pick you up? My uncle is on his way, she said quietly. Dad is out of town? Amira nodded thoughtfully. I can stay with you until he arrives, she offered. Harper's head snapped up. You don't have to. I know, Amira said, but you shouldn't be alone right now. Harper blinked several times, then wiped a tear from her cheek. Thank you. Amira sat beside her on the bench. They didn't speak for a long stretch of time. It was a quiet, reflective silence, not tense, not heavy, just human. After several minutes, Harper whispered, I always thought Mom's confidence was strength. I thought she knew everything. Amira looked out toward the window, where the sun traced long beams across the floor. Sometimes confidence is just fear wearing expensive clothes, she said. Harper let out a shaky laugh, small, but real. That sounds exactly like her. Amira smiled. She'll have to face her choices now. Harper nodded, her voice trembling. Will she go to prison? Amira hesitated. Harper, that's not my decision, and I'm not rooting for her to suffer. Harper looked at her, confused. You're not? No, Amira said softly. I don't need her to be punished. I just needed the truth. Harper stared down at her hands. I don't want her to be destroyed. I know, Amira said. And I don't think accountability is destruction. It's a beginning if she lets it be. Harper breathed deeply, as if those words had reached a part of her she didn't know needed comfort. After some time, a tall man with gentle eyes and a stern brow hurried toward them. Harper, he called. You okay? Uncle Ethan, Harper whispered, getting up to hug him tightly. He looked at Amira with recognition and something like gratitude. You must be Dr. Lennox, he said. I'm sorry for what she did. You don't need to apologize for someone else's actions, Amira said softly. He nodded, though guilt still pressed into his expression. We'll take care of Harper, he said. Amira smiled. Good. Harper stepped forward. Will I see you again? She asked quietly. Amira looked at her with gentle certainty. I think so. Harper nodded. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a beginning. When Amira finally walked outside, the air was warm. Phoenix warm, soft desert heat that clung to the skin but felt grounding after the sterile cold inside the terminal. A black sedan waited for her at the curb, a driver holding the door open respectfully. Amira paused and breathed deeply. So much had happened in just a few hours. A lie. A public humiliation. A federal interrogation. A family broken. A truth upheld. Her heart felt heavy, but not defeated. Justice wasn't a victory march. It was a quiet, steady restoration of balance. And sometimes the balance didn't leave anyone feeling triumphant, it just left them feeling human. As she stepped into the car, her phone buzzed. A message from her chief of staff. D.C. team ready. We're behind you. Whenever you land, a second message followed. And Amira, we're proud of you. She closed her eyes, letting those words settle deep into her chest. For the first time since the day began, she felt the smallest flicker of peace. Not because the world was fair, not because justice was perfect, but because she had survived another moment that tried to define her, and she had defined it instead. The car pulled away from the terminal, the sun casting long golden light across the road. There was still a long journey ahead, but Amira Lennox wasn't afraid of journeys. She had built her life from them. The black sedan eased away from the curb, leaving behind the bright windows and echoing hallways of the terminal. As it turned onto the airport's service road, Amira leaned her head back, letting the hum of the engine steady her breathing. She didn't close her eyes, not yet, but she let the world blur slightly around the edges, just enough to let the tension drain from her body. Phoenix stretched wide and warm around her, the desert sun lowering toward the horizon, softening everything in a way the fluorescent-lit confrontation never could. It felt like stepping out of a storm and realizing the sky was still capable of beautiful things. The driver, an older man with silver at his temples, glanced at her through the mirror. "You doing all right back there, ma'am?" Amira gave a small smile. "I will be." He nodded, respectful and quiet. "We'll get you to the private terminal in about 12 minutes. If you need anything, just say so." "Thank you," she replied. She appreciated the silence after that. No questions, no apologies, no explanations, just quiet. The kind that allows a person to think without feeling watched. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Marcus Green, her CFO. Saw the preliminary FAA notice. Call me if you need anything. Another message followed a second later. And Amira, this wasn't your fault. Don't let today rewrite anything about who you are. She exhaled slowly. Marcus always had a way of grounding her clean, calm sentences like those sturdy bolts and rivets that keep an aircraft frame from shaking apart mid-flight. She typed a quick reply. "I'm okay. Heading to the charter now. D.C. is still happening." He responded almost instantly. "Good. That's where your story continues, not back there." His words lingered with her. "Not back there." The sedan turned off the main road toward a checkpoint. The private terminal at Sky Harbor was tucked away from the noisy commercial gates, quiet, secure, a place where people with complicated schedules and high-profile destinations came and went without fanfare. Amira felt the difference immediately. No crowds, no shouting, no eyes watching her every move. The gate guard waved the sedan through without hesitation. A sense of calm washed over her, not because she needed luxury, but because she needed silence. The car stopped beside a sleek, modern lounge building. A waiting staff member hurried out to greet her. "Dr. Lennox," the woman said warmly. "Welcome. Your aircraft is being prepared. May I escort you inside?" Amira nodded. Inside, the lounge smelled faintly of cedar and fresh linen. Soft jazz played over hidden speakers. No fluorescent lights, just warm amber lamps and desert sunlight. It felt like stepping underwater, everything quiet, slowed, softened. The staff woman gestured to a seating area. "Please make yourself comfortable. Water? Tea?" "Water is fine," Amira said. The woman disappeared, and Amira sat down on a deep sofa that felt like exhaling into cushions. She set her bag on the floor at her feet, her hands resting open on her knees. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not much. Just enough to remind her body that adrenaline had carried her through the past hours and now wanted its payment. She inhaled slowly. One breath for grounding. One breath for release. One breath for remembering who she was. The door to the lounge opened again. She looked up and froze. Harper Whitford stood in the entrance, her uncle Ethan behind her. Harper's eyes widened the moment she saw Amira, as if she hadn't expected to run into her again so soon. Ethan approached cautiously. "Dr. Lennox," he said with a respectful nod. "I didn't mean to intrude. The airline asked us to wait here while they sort out our relocation for the night." Amira nodded. "Of course. You're not intruding." Harper swallowed. "I thought you would already be gone." "My flight leaves soon," Amira said. "But I'm still here." Harper hesitated, shifting nervously. "Can I talk to you? Just for a moment?" Amira gestured toward the sofa. "Of course." Harper sat, hugging her arms across her chest. Ethan moved a few seats away, giving them privacy without leaving the room. "I wanted to thank you," Harper said softly, "for being kind, for not yelling, for not being like her." Amira smiled gently. "Kindness doesn't cost much, and it usually pays itself back." Harper nodded, her eyes glistening again. I think she believed she was right. Even when she wasn't. I don't know how to love her and still admit she hurt people." Amira considered that carefully. "You don't have to choose between loving someone and seeing their flaws," Amira said. "Loving someone doesn't mean agreeing with everything they do." Harper looked down. "But what if the world thinks I'm like her? What if—" "You are not her," Amira said firmly. The words landed like an anchor, heavy, grounding, necessary. Harper began crying again. Quiet tears this time, the kind that come from finally letting truth settle where denial used to sit. I don't want to be like her, Harper whispered. You won't be, Amira said, because you already see the harm. You already care. Harper wiped her face. I want to be better. And you will be, Amira said with a soft certainty. Better begins with honesty. Harper let out a shaky breath. I'm really sorry, Dr. Lennox. I know, Amira said gently. And I hear you. She placed a light hand on Harper's shoulder, not forgiving Eleanor, not excusing her, but acknowledging the girl in front of her. Someone who was trying, someone who wanted to grow, someone who deserved the chance. Harper leaned into the touch, just for a moment. Then, a voice came from the doorway. Dr. Lennox, the pilot is ready for you. Amira stood, gathering her bag. Harper rose too. Will you tell them not to ruin her life? Harper asked, voice trembling. Amira hesitated. Harper, she said softly, your mother's life isn't ruined. It's changing, and change feels like breaking until the pieces settle differently. Harper nodded, tears falling again. I hope she changes, Harper whispered. So do I, Amira replied. The walk to the aircraft was short. The sun had dipped lower, washing the tarmac in deep orange. A sleek Gulfstream waited, engines humming softly, a small flight crew standing at the base of the steps. Everything was smooth, efficient, ready. But as she reached the stairs, she stopped and looked back. Harper stood in the lounge doorway, Ethan's arm around her shoulders. She wasn't crying now. She was watching, watching with hope, watching with uncertainty, watching with the fragile courage of someone choosing a different path than the one she came from. Amira raised a hand in a small wave. Harper lifted her own. Then, Amira climbed the steps. Inside, the cabin was cool and quiet, washed in soft golden light. She settled into a wide leather seat as the pilot stepped out to greet her. Dr. Lennox, he said warmly. We're honored to fly you tonight. We'll be wheels up in 10 minutes. Washington, D.C. arrival just after midnight. Thank you, Amira said. Anything you need, just tell us. He retreated to the cockpit. Amira leaned back in her seat. As the engines increased their low rumble, she felt the vibrations settle through her bones, steady, powerful, familiar. The cabin lights dimmed. The sky outside darkened. The aircraft began to taxi. Her phone buzzed once more. A message from Marcus. You've done enough for today. Rest. Tomorrow is about the work, not the injustice. Another deep breath. Another small release. The jet lifted off the runway, carrying her away from the chaos below and toward a room in Washington, where her real work waited. The stars came into view. The city lights fell away. And for the first time all day, Amira allowed herself to close her eyes. Not to hide, not to escape, but to prepare. The world had tried to tear her down that afternoon. Tomorrow, she would change it. Washington, D.C. always greeted travelers with a particular kind of gravity, an unspoken seriousness woven into the architecture. The air, even the quiet hum of cars passing along Constitution Avenue. When Amira's charter jet touched down just after midnight, the capital was draped in a soft haze, streetlights casting pale halos across empty roads. By the time she arrived at her Georgetown townhouse, exhaustion had seeped deep into her bones. She didn't turn on all the lights, just one lamp in the living room, a warm circle of gold, enough to remind her she was home. She set her bag on the table, exhaled slowly, and let the silence wrap around her. A part of her wanted to collapse onto the couch and let sleep take her. But tomorrow's briefing wasn't just another meeting. It was the meeting. Sky Shield had the potential to shift the future of aviation security, and after what happened in Phoenix, its purpose felt even sharper. She walked to her desk, opened her laptop, and reviewed the slides one more time. The equations, the threat maps, the behavioral prediction model, they steadied her. They were the world she understood, the world she built. Her world. At 2:03 a.m., she finally allowed herself to sleep for a few hours. Morning arrived quickly, bright and brisk. Amira dressed in a navy suit, simple, tailored, confident without shouting. A quiet statement of capability. Her hair was pulled back, her expression calm, composed. Her driver arrived on time, and they made their way to the Department of Transportation headquarters, a reflective building that gleamed under the morning light. Inside, the security protocols were as strict as always: badge scans, metal detectors, multiple identity checks. But the staff treated her with a respect she didn't take for granted. Dr. Lennox, good morning, one officer said with a slight smile. They're expecting you upstairs. Thank you, Amira replied. She rode the elevator to the 8th floor, where the federal briefing room was located. As the doors opened, she saw Marcus Green, her CFO, leaning against a wall, sipping coffee. You made it, he said with relief. After yesterday, I wasn't sure if you'd be in the headspace for this. Amira raised an eyebrow. Marcus, you know me. He chuckled. Right? Emotional turmoil first, national aviation security second. I can multitask, Amira said dryly. Marcus lowered his cup. How are you really? She hesitated. I'm steady, she said softly. A little worn, but steady. He nodded, knowingly. Sometimes steady is enough. They walked into the main briefing room together. The room was large, oval-shaped, with screens covering every wall. Federal officials, analysts, and aviation executives filled the seats. Conversations quieted as Amira entered. She felt their attention, not worship, not skepticism, but anticipation. People had been waiting for Sky Shield. A woman in a dark burgundy blazer approached. Dr. Lennox, she said warmly. I'm Deputy Secretary Karen Holt. We're honored to have you. Thank you for inviting me, Amira replied. We've reviewed the preliminary data your team sent, Holt said. It's impressive. Marcus smirked behind her. Told you. Amira tried not to roll her eyes. The deputy secretary led Amira to the front of the room. A large screen flickered to life with the Sky Shield title slide. Amira placed her notes on the podium, inhaled deeply, and began. Good morning, she said, her voice smooth and steady. Thank you for being here. The room settled. For the past 3 years, Lennox Aerial Systems has been developing a threat detection algorithm that bridges 3 major aviation domains: human behavior, digital security, and physical infrastructure response. She clicked to the next slide, a complex flowchart, pulsing with interconnected systems. Sky Shield is not just a system. It's a conversation between multiple systems. It listens to what airports often overlook. Another slide. Traditional security focuses on physical objects. But Sky Shield analyzes intent. She saw heads nodding, people leaning forward. It picks up irregular behavior patterns, cross-references them with digital anomalies, and predicts risk before it manifests. She moved confidently between slides, walking the room through examples, case studies, pilot tests. She presented data from airports where Sky Shield predicted incidents that would otherwise have gone unnoticed. Finally, she reached the slide she'd debated, including the one from Phoenix. A diagram appeared showing the behavioral mismatch between Eleanor's claims and Amira's recorded activity. Security footage, timestamps, passenger testimonies, lounge staff reports. A quiet ripple swept through the room. Yesterday, Amira said gently, a false accusation triggered a federal response. Not because there was real danger, but because our systems cannot yet distinguish between truth and prejudice. Silence deepened. Sky Shield can help close that gap, she continued. Not by judging people, but by judging data. Someone near the front exhaled sharply, as if releasing something they'd been holding for far too long. Deputy Secretary Holt sat back, her expression somber and thoughtful. Dr. Lennox, a man in a gray suit, said, Are you implying the system could have prevented what happened to you yesterday? Amira considered her words. I'm saying it could have prevented the escalation, she replied. It could have given the crew context. It could have shown the contradiction between the report and the reality. It could have reduced harm. There was a collective murmur of agreement. Marcus glanced at her with quiet pride. Amira clicked to the final slide. Sky Shield isn't here to replace human judgment, she said. It's here to inform it, to protect the skies not just from danger, but from misinformation, from assumption, from human error. The room rose into applause, not thunderous, but respectful and deeply sincere. Amira felt it wash over her, a validation she hadn't asked for, but needed more than she admitted. After the briefing, officials gathered around her. Deputy Secretary Holt took her hand. What happened in Phoenix was unacceptable, she said. But your ability to turn harm into progress is extraordinary. Thank you, Amira replied quietly. We'll be moving forward with a federal trial of Sky Shield, Holt said. This is going to change everything. Marcus grinned wide. Told you? Amira gave him a pointed look. I know, Marcus. He lowered his voice. How are you feeling now? Amira paused. I think. She looked around the room, the officials, the analysts, the screens displaying the future she helped build. I think today reminded me why yesterday didn't break me. Marcus nodded. Because you were already building something stronger. She let out a small, genuine laugh. Something like that. As they walked toward the elevator, a staffer ran up to them, tablet in hand. Dr. Lennox, excuse me, something you should see. He turned the tablet toward her. A news headline filled the screen. FAA opens investigation into false threat report, filed by Eleanor Whitford. Below it, another headline. Witnesses confirm racial bias at play in Phoenix airport incident. Harper's statement was included. Dr. Lennox did nothing wrong. My mother's actions were based on prejudice, not truth. Amira stared at the screen quietly. Not triumphant, not vindicated. Just thoughtful. Marcus watched her carefully. What are you thinking? Amira exhaled. That the story is finally bigger than the harm. He nodded. And that's good? Yes, she said softly. Because stories shape systems. And systems shape what comes next. The staffer hesitated. There's more. He scrolled. A final headline appeared. Lennox Aerial Systems Sky Shield proposal gains federal momentum. Marcus grinned. I knew today would flip the narrative. Amira smiled faintly. No, she said. Today didn't flip the narrative. It revealed the truth beneath it. Marcus looked at her with respect. You ready for what comes next? Amira inhaled. Steady. Grounded. Stronger than yesterday. Yes, she said. I think I finally am. The late afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of the DOT building, casting long, warm streaks across the polished floor. After the briefing, after the meetings, after the inevitable flood of follow-up questions, Amira finally stepped outside into the crisp Washington air. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until now. The city moved around her in its usual rhythm, busy but grounded, purposeful but not frantic. D.C. had always felt like the middle point between power and quiet conviction. Maybe that's why she'd made it her home base. It matched her temperament more than she understood at the time. Marcus walked beside her, briefcase in hand, still buzzing from the success of the presentation. You realize, he said, we just got the green light for the biggest aviation security shift in 15 years? Amira offered a small smile. I realize, and you realize, he continued, that your name will be all over this? Agencies, airports, federal manuals everywhere. Marcus, please. Amira groaned lightly. At least let my adrenaline crash before you hype me up again. He laughed. Sorry. I can't help it. I'm proud of you. She slowed her steps, thinking about that. Proud. People said it often. But hearing it today, it hit differently. Not because of ambition, not because of recognition, but because survival had turned into impact. And impact was all she had ever wanted. A black SUV approached the curb her security detail arranged by the DOT for the next 48 hours. They had insisted on it, given the media attention building around the Phoenix incident. As the driver stepped out to open the door for her, Marcus touched her elbow. Before we get pulled into more official chaos, do you want to check the news? Amira hesitated. I'm not sure I should. Marcus shrugged. It's better to know than to guess. She took the phone he handed her. The top news notification was from a national outlet. False report sparks national conversation on racial bias and air travel protocols. Another headline sat below it. Who is Dr. Amira Lennox? The brilliant mind behind Sky Shield. She swallowed. It was strange, seeing her name suddenly woven into two conversations she never intended to join. One born from harm, the other from creation. The media had divided her day into two stories. The one she endured, and the one she built. Marcus watched her face carefully. You? Okay? Amira nodded slowly. Just absorbing. They got into the SUV. The door closed. The world outside softened into muted sounds. As the car began to move, her phone buzzed again, this time with an unknown number. The driver glanced back. "You can answer if you'd like, ma'am. This line is secure." Amira tapped the screen. "Hello?" A hesitant voice responded. "Hi, Dr. Lennox. It's Harper." Amira straightened. "Harper, are you all right?" There was a quiet sniffle on the other end. "Yes. Or, kind of." A shaky exhale. "Can I talk to you? Just for a minute?" "Of course." The pause that followed wasn't empty. It was weighted, thick with the kind of vulnerability only honesty can carry. "I saw the news," Harper whispered. They're saying, they're saying Mom might face charges." Amira's heart tightened slightly. "I saw that." "I don't know what to feel," Harper said. "Part of me thinks she deserves consequences. Another part of me, she's still my mom." "It's okay to feel both," Amira said gently. Harper hesitated. "Did you hate her, even for a moment?" Amira closed her eyes. "Hate is a heavy thing to carry," she said quietly. "I've learned not to pick it up unless I have to." "So, you don't hate her?" "No," Amira said. "I don't." Harper's breath shook. "Why not?" "Because her choices aren't a reflection of me," Amira replied. "They're a reflection of her. I refuse to let what she did become part of my identity." Harper didn't speak for a long while. Finally, she said, "I wish I could think like that." "You will," Amira said softly. "Growth hurts, but you're already facing the truth. That's more than most people do." The line went quiet. Then Harper whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on being decent, even when she wasn't." Amira smiled faintly. "Decency isn't for other people. It's for ourselves." Harper let out a small, tearful laugh. "I'll remember that." When the call ended, Amira sat quietly, her thoughts heavier than before, but in a meaningful way. Sometimes healing wasn't about tending to your own wounds. Sometimes it was about reminding someone else they had a chance to grow. The SUV arrived at the Lennox Aerial Systems D.C. office, where a small group of senior engineers and analysts were waiting inside. The building wasn't large, but it was sleek and modern: glass walls, clean lines, greenery woven into the architecture. Her team greeted her with warm smiles and proud eyes. "You did it," said Nadia Patel, her lead data architect. "We saw the briefing results. Sky Shield is officially under federal review." "And the media," added Jordan Lee, cybersecurity lead, "is losing its mind over you." "Don't remind me," Amira said with a groan. The team chuckled. Marcus cleared his throat. "Everyone, give her a minute to sit." Amira sank into the nearest chair. "Thank you." Nadia placed a cup of chamomile tea in front of her. "You look like you slept 4 hours in the last 2 days." "3. Actually," Amira corrected softly. Nadia's eyebrows shot up. "That's worse." Jordan added carefully, "We're here to brief you on next steps, but if you want to rest first, we can wait." Amira shook her head. "Let's go over everything now. Momentum matters." The team opened their laptops and began outlining the federal integration schedule. Pilot airports, data sharing protocols, staff training modules, public communication strategies. Amira listened, asked questions, took notes. Her mind moved smoothly through the technical landscape, precise, clear, decisive. But every now and then, the Phoenix incident echoed faintly in the back of her mind, not as a trauma, but as context, a reminder of why Sky Shield mattered. When the meeting wrapped, Jordan leaned in. "By the way, someone left something for you." Amira blinked. "What?" Jordan handed her a small padded envelope. There was no name, just a note taped to it. He passed her the slip of paper. "For Dr. Lennox, you deserve better." From a witness. Amira frowned softly and opened the envelope. Inside was an old-fashioned silver pen. Elegant, heavy, beautifully crafted. She held it carefully. Jordan asked, "Do you know who sent it?" "No," Amira said quietly. "But I can guess." Her mind drifted to a kind older man in a business suit. Mr. Clayton Rhodes, the passenger who had risen to defend her when no one else dared. A small warmth bloomed in her chest. Human decency, she thought, really does echo. That evening, as the sky dimmed into soft violet, Amira stepped out onto the small balcony connected to her office floor. The city buzzed below, alive, electric, full of stories unfolding in homes and streets and hearts. Marcus joined her, leaning on the railing. "You did something big today," he said. Amira shook her head. "We did something big." He smiled. "You're allowed to take credit sometimes, you know?" "I'm working on it," she said softly. They watched the city lights flicker. Marcus's tone shifted to something more thoughtful. "You know, what happened in Phoenix? It didn't diminish you." Amira looked at him. "It showed people what you've always had." He said, a steadiness that doesn't break on impact. Amira exhaled. "Then why does it still feel heavy?" "Because you're human," he said. "Not hollow." She nodded slowly. "Marcus, do you think people can really change?" He took his time answering. "I think people change when life stops protecting their illusions," he said. "Eleanor's illusions shattered yesterday. Harper's illusions cracked too. But cracks let the light in." Amira let that settle in her heart. Maybe that was the twist in all of this, the unexpected place where healing begins. Not always with the person who caused harm. Sometimes with the person who witnessed it. She turned to Marcus. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start building the federal rollout roadmap." He grinned. "Already ahead of you." She smiled softly. The weight she carried still existed, but now it had purpose, direction, meaning. Sometimes the world tries to collapse into a single moment of prejudice. But sometimes, the world expands into something larger instead. And tonight, under the lights of Washington, Dr. Amira Lennox felt that expansion begin. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass walls of the Lennox Aerial Systems D.C. headquarters, casting a warm glow across the open workspace. It was quiet, too early for most of the team, but Dr. Amira Lennox was already there, standing alone in the center of the conference room. Today was different. Today, everything she had survived, built, and proven would crystallize into reality. In just a few hours, she would stand beside the Deputy Secretary of Transportation for the public announcement. Sky Shield, the first integrated aviation security intelligence system led by a Black-owned tech company, would officially launch across major U.S. airports. The journey had been long. The last few days had been exhausting. But the moment now unfolding, it felt like the opening of a new chapter, not the closing of one. Amira placed her hands on the edge of the conference table. For a moment, she let herself breathe. Really breathe. Then, her phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number. "You don't know me, but I know what happened on Flight 227. I want to say, I'm sorry. For all of us who stayed silent that day." Amira stared at the words. Silent witnesses. Silent guilt. Silent realizations. It struck her not as bitterness, but as something softer, something like acknowledgement. Not every apology needs a name. Some simply need courage. She typed back one word. "Thank you." And she meant it. A knock sounded at the door. Marcus Green poked his head in, wearing a navy suit and the kind of smile that tried to hide excitement but failed terribly. "You're early," he said. "So are you." Marcus stepped inside. "Couldn't sleep. Too much adrenaline, I guess." "You and me both." He walked around the table and placed a folder in front of her. The final press outline. Holt signed off. Reeves sent over the FAA's official statement for cross-reference. And he hesitated. One more thing came in. He slid a sealed envelope toward her. Amira frowned. "What's this?" "A letter. Delivered by courier. No sender info." She picked it up, weighing it in her hand. The paper was thick, expensive, old-fashioned. Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. T.W." Amira felt her pulse slow. T.W. Thomas Whitford. Eleanor's husband. The man whose silence had once empowered her arrogance. The man who had walked away from the FAA years ago, drowning in politics and regret. Marcus watched her face carefully. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No," Amira said softly. "But I want to understand it." She folded the letter gently. "It's strange," she continued. "People think justice means punishment, but sometimes it looks like clarity, like truth settling in places that were empty for too long." Marcus nodded. "Redemption isn't loud. It whispers." Amira let out a slow, thoughtful breath. Yes, she murmured. It does. By mid-morning, the office was buzzing, engineers doing last-minute checks, administrators reviewing schedules, security teams coordinating with DOT and FAA officials. The energy was electric and warm, all at once. Nadia rushed toward Amira with a tablet in hand. Doctor, Lennox, traffic is building outside. Press vans everywhere. The DOT wants you to use the underground entrance to avoid crowding. Amira blinked. Crowding? You're trending, Nadia said. Every reporter wants your statement. Some are calling you the woman who rewrote federal aviation standards. Amira groaned quietly. Lord, help me. The team laughed. Jordan, standing nearby, shook his head. Well, at least they're focusing on your work, not the Phoenix incident. But Nadia cleared her throat. Actually, about Phoenix. Amira tensed. What about it? Eleanor Whitford requested a preliminary hearing today. Marcus looked up sharply. Already? Yes, Nadia said. And she's asking for leniency. Amira exhaled. Not angry, not surprised. Just reflective. Marcus lowered his voice. Do you want updates as they come in? No, Amira said gently. Let her walk her path. I'm walking mine. The room grew quiet for a moment. Respectfully quiet. Because in that single sentence, the whole team understood. The story would not end in bitterness. It would end where growth begins. A little before noon, black SUVs pulled up in front of the DOT building. Officials ushered Amira inside through the back entrance, guiding her to a private elevator. On the ride up, Agent Sofia Calderon joined her, hands clasped behind her back. You holding up okay? The agent asked softly. Amira smiled. Better than expected. That's good, Sofia said. You deserve a good day. There was a sincerity to it that Amira hadn't expected. Honest, simple, human. When the elevator opened, Deputy Secretary Karen Holt was waiting. She extended her hand. Dr. Lennox. Welcome. Thank you, Amira said. It's an honor to be here. Holt smiled warmly. The honor is ours. They walked together into the main hall, bright, modern, filled with press equipment, a stage, and rows of seating. The backdrop displayed U.S. Department of Transportation, National Aviation-Security Initiative, featuring Lennox Aerial Systems Sky Shield. Marcus whispered beside her. Looks surreal, doesn't it? Amira nodded. It does. As they approached the stage, a hush fell over the room. A moment. A breath. A step into history. When Holt finished her introduction filled with policy context and national goals, she turned to Amira. It is my privilege, Holt announced, to introduce a visionary leader whose work will shape the future of aviation safety, Dr. Amira Lennox. Applause rose full, warm, genuine. Amira stepped up to the podium. Her heartbeat was steady. Good afternoon, she began. Her voice was calm, strong, carrying the quiet dignity that had guided her through chaos and clarity alike. Today isn't about me. It's about trust, the trust we place in the skies above us, and the trust we build between the people who keep those skies safe. Cameras clicked softly. Sky Shield was born from a simple belief, she continued. That safety isn't reactive, it's proactive. That data can protect us. That innovation can serve everyone. And that the aviation world can be both secure and humane. She let her eyes move across the room. Some of you know, she said gently, that the journey here wasn't smooth. I faced something recently that shook me, not because of the harm it caused, but because of the truth it exposed. The room stilled. But here's what I learned, she continued. You can weaponize fear, or you can confront it. You can tear people down, or you can lift systems up. You can fight for power, or you can build for progress. Her voice softened. I chose progress. A quiet ripple of emotion moved across the hall. Today, she said, we take a step forward not by ignoring bias or pain, but by building something strong enough to rise above it. And this partnership between the DOT, the FAA, and Lennox Aerial Systems is proof that we can move forward together. She stepped back from the podium. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was warm, sustained, respectful. The kind of applause given not for spectacle, but for truth. After the ceremony, as officials mingled and cameras shut down, An older man approached quietly from the side of the room. Amira recognized him instantly. Mr. Clayton Rhodes. The man who had stood for her when she had been dragged from her seat. The man who had defended her when silence felt safer. The man who had sent the silver pen. He gave her a gentle smile. "Dr. Lennox," he said, "I just wanted to see you speak in person." Amira's heart warmed. "Mr. Rhodes, thank you for everything." He shook his head. "No, thank you. You reminded people what dignity looks like." Amira touched the pen in her pocket. "It meant a lot what you did." He nodded softly. "Courage always starts small, but it echoes. Remember that." She would, for the rest of her life. Later that evening, as the sun set over Washington and painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, Amira found a quiet spot near the reflecting pool. She sat on a bench, watching the calm ripple of water. The world felt still, not silent, just peaceful. Her phone vibrated again. A final message from Harper. "I hope you found the day you deserved. I'm trying to be better. Thank you for showing me what that looks like." Amira closed her eyes. Growth, consequences, redemption, healing. Life didn't move in straight lines. It moved in echoes. And tonight, those echoes felt soft, hopeful, human. She stood, looking out over the water, strong, quiet, rooted. The future wasn't something she had stepped into today. It was something she had built, piece by piece, through storms and breakthroughs alike. And now, it was hers. It was open sky. Dr. Amira Lennox's story is more than just a story about a black female CEO being treated unfairly in first class. It's a powerful reminder that in modern life, success doesn't exempt us from prejudice, and dignity isn't always immediately recognized. Amira chose to respond with calm, wisdom, and dignity, qualities that anyone of any age can emulate. Instead of responding to the insult with anger, she chose clarity. Instead of seeing herself as a victim, she chose to set a new standard. It is a lesson that adults, who have been through many twists and turns in life, know better than anyone. Calmness is true strength. The story also reminds us that justice is not always immediate, but it always finds its way. The truth may be distorted for a moment, but it will ultimately stand when courageous voices are raised, whether from a stranger witness, a child learning to grow up, or the victim herself. More importantly, the story offers hope that people can change, that stereotypes can be broken, and that every act of kindness, no matter how small, creates big ripples in society. Thank you for taking the time to read this emotional story. I hope it brings you reflection, empathy, and a little faith in the good. If you find the story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to open up more healing and inspirational journeys.